So one of the reasons why it's very important to find your buyer first, right? Especially if you go into new territories, even if you're just getting started, is because buyers can give you invaluable information about a new territory going in.
You're listening to Flip Empire, the show committed to helping real estate entrepreneurs who want to build their empire without sacrificing their life. Your success and freedom starts now with your host, Alex Pardo.
If you would like to learn how you can find, fund, and profit from cash flowing self-storage facilities within the next 6 to 12 months without using your own money or needing any experience, I want you to go ahead and head over to www.storagewins.com. Be detailed with the information you submit in the application. And if I like what you have to say, I'll invite you on a call to see how we can work together and I can show you how you can profit from cash flowing self-storage facilities. So with that being said, guys, I want to go ahead and prep you for what you're about to learn on today's masterclass here on the Flip Empire Show. I'm interviewing Chris Logan, who is the founder of Virtual Wholesaling MadeSimple.com. And it's an online community and coaching program showing wholesalers how to make $20,000 in the first 90 days. And Chris is somebody who's done well over 600 deals. He started operating a virtual wholesaling business even well before COVID, so he was well ahead of the curve. And on today's podcast, guys, we are going to specifically talk about how you can find the right territory, the number one thing you need to do before you do anything else. And this is contrary to what most people out there teach. We're going to talk about dispositions, which is an area of the business that I don't think gets enough time, energy, and attention, and how you can efficiently, quickly, and profitably dispose of your wholesale deals. So I want to introduce you to Chris here on episode 744. Welcome back, guys, to another episode on the Flip Empire Show. I am your host, Alex Pardo, and this is episode 744. And I am joined by a new friend. And I say new because my man, Chris Logan, and I connected earlier this year. And just a really solid dude. He's got a great business. And we've just connected. And I had the privilege and honor of being on his podcast, which is going to be launching pretty soon here. So we'll definitely mention that at some point so that you guys can connect. Check it out. Support Chris. He's got a lot of great value to share. And speaking of value, you know, I always am very mindful and intentional about who I bring on the show. And Chris was telling me, and I was just humbled that he's coming up in his journey. He would tune into the Flip Empire podcast. And that's why I do this, guys. And that's why I'm always thinking about who are the guests that I want to have on here. And Chris is somebody who is been there, done that, and he's coaching people. He's in the business. And so this particular podcast is going to be all about wholesaling. And Chris has kind of a different way to think about and approach wholesaling than a lot of other people out there that I've seen. So I'm really excited about this. With that being said, Chris, my man, it is awesome to have you on the show, brother.
Alex, thanks for that introduction, man. I appreciate it. And I'm really excited to be here. As I was telling you offline, I've actually listened to the Flip Empire podcast for a very long time. When I was coming up in my journey, I would listen to your podcast. I would take notes and I'd implement things in my own business and see success. So I'm just excited to be here today. And it's pretty awesome coming full circle. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, man. Again, I'm really, really looking forward to the conversation. So as you know, I got started as a wholesaler. I did wholesaling for a good 16 years. Mm-hmm. I've since transitioned from a wholesaling business model into storage, but I'm actually in the process of wholesaling a storage facility now. So I love wholesaling. Particularly for people that are getting started or people that are looking to generate more money, because as you know, the barriers to entry are so low. We don't need to use our cash, or we don't need to have experience and credit and all that good stuff. But before we kind of get into the heart of the content as it relates to the wholesaling business and kind of how you think about and operate your wholesaling business, talk to us about your journey, brother. Like, what got you started into real estate?
Awesome. Yeah. So when I first got started in real estate, like, you know, I had a lot of limiting beliefs. Like, you know, you had to have tons of money to get started in real estate. Like, you had to go out and get loans from banks, and you had to know about construction to fix up properties and stuff. So all this was kind of discouraging to me until I found the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. So I found the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. A friend of my church recommended me the book. I read it, was totally blown away by everything in it, but I still didn't have like a game plan of like how to get my first property, right? And so I was checking my email one day at my girlfriend's apartment at the time. She's now my wife. And I saw this banner ad for Robert Kiyosaki coming to Tampa, Florida, which is where I live. And I was super pumped. I was like, man, I'm going to go up and shake this guy's hand, tell him how awesome he is for writing that book, and just learn where my next steps in real estate are going to be. So long story short, it was like a 3-day event. He wasn't there, obviously. And they threw up a whole bunch of different strategies up on the board, on a whiteboard. They drew like rehabbing, creative finance, all these different new construction, all these different strategies. But the one that stood out to me, the one that was like, man, this makes sense, was wholesaling. How they brought up how you could take a piece of paper, you could flip it for tens of thousands of dollars, and you could do this multiple times a month. I was like, this makes sense. At that point, we signed up for a coach. We signed up for like a 2 or 3 day class 2 in Miami. Totally had our minds blown, hit the ground running. And I'd love to tell you that, it was sunshine and rainbows, and I did 100 deals in my first year or something crazy like that. But it actually took me about 6 months to do my first deal. Okay. I only made $4,000, but that was only proof that I needed to know that this worked.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. There's a lot of people that get started in this business and they have the expectation that they're going to be an overnight success, or they think, hey, yeah, I'm a week away from getting my first check. In your particular case, it took you 6 months. Can you talk to us a little bit about your mindset and how you approached not allowing yourself to get discouraged? I'm sure there may have been some frustration that said that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I really want to dive into is, how did you think about continuing to keep going and not giving up? Because there's people listening to this that are either getting started or they've gotten started in their journey, but for whatever reason, they're not experiencing the success or the results that they're after. Talk to us a little bit about your mindset during that time, during that 6 months where you were working on getting your first deal.
100%. There's a saying that's another level, another devil, right? So I feel like no matter what stage of the game that we're at, whether we're just getting started, we're intermediate or advanced, there's always a level we're shooting for. And you can experience the feelings that I'm about to share with you here on any level. But for me, when I was first getting started, and I was on this journey of getting my first deal, really I wasn't going to let anything stop me for getting that deal, right? I knew that I was meant to be in real estate. I knew that if anybody else could do it, I could do it. And I just had to keep taking a step every single day. That's the only thing that I could control, is if I was willing to get up in the morning and take a step. And so that's what I did. I did a ton of stuff wrong. Probably if there was like, a list of all the things you should not do in wholesaling or real estate, I would probably check off all those on the list.
I've been there too.
Yeah. And I mean, it was really funny. So, but I just kept taking steps forward every single day. A lot of people focus on the things they can't control. That causes stress, that causes anxiety. But for me, on my journey, what I wanted to do is I wanted to focus on the only thing that I could control. And my goal was just to be 1% better than I was the day before. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Got it, man. I love it. And it's so, what I really appreciate about what you just shared, Chris, is that it's simple. Sometimes people tend to overthink things but no, it's just keep going. It's just 1% better each day. Take a step. You're going to fall, but just know that like anything worth pursuing, you're going to have resistance. There's going to be friction. There's going to be setbacks. If you expect that and you have that mentality and you know that you're going to get through it, and that's where the growth and the part of the journey is going to really provide fruit long term, then I think you're in a much better position to like not be deterred when the obstacles and the challenges come that you have to overcome. So, brother, with that being said, I want to kind of transition now into giving people like some really practical advice and steps that they can take in a wholesaling business. Now, I got to give you credit, brother, because when I was running a wholesaling operation, ours was not virtual. We were doing deals face to face, belly to belly. And I transitioned out of wholesaling right around the time that COVID came, right? And I think COVID was a blessing in disguise. I believe we talked about this on your podcast because it forced people to open their eyes and realize that like, you don't have to continue to operate the way that it used to be in the past. Like, it is very possible, more than possible, because you're doing it and there's others that are doing it, running a successful wholesaling operation virtually. So I want to kind of start with step one. For people listening to this that might be belly to belly or are not into wholesaling right now, how do we even think about choosing a territory? So when we talk about virtual wholesaling, the country is our oyster, right? What are some steps or advice, anything you can share as it relates to like choosing the right territory?
Sure. So a lot of people think when they're transitioning into virtual, right? And we got into virtual actually 2 years before COVID. So when COVID came along, it was a total blessing that we already had that in place and we're rocking and rolling. And so we were able to share with a lot of people how to have success with that. But if you're just getting started, a lot of people think going nationwide is the best way to go, right? But the issue is that's really overwhelming. Like you said, 52 states, right? You're like, where do I start? How do I pick a territory? There's rural territories. There's territories where a lot of people are moving to. There's popular states like California, New York. Is that a good place to start? So it can be really overwhelming, right? So I approach virtual wholesaling completely different than most people. I don't think you should start nationwide by any means at first. What you want to do is you want to pick a territory. And the way that you do that is with a two-step system that I have. Okay. So you can do this. You don't need any fancy tools to be able to pick a territory. All you need is a free search engine called Google. Everybody's heard of that, right? And yeah, and you're going to do this two-step process. And if you follow these two steps, and this is the only information you know, you're going to be able to pick the best territories across the states. And so I'll give you that two steps. But before I do, really quick, there's two reasons why people typically pick a place to start, right? The first reason is because they've heard it's a good area, but they're not 100% sure. So it piques their interest, and they're like, maybe I want to start wholesaling in Georgia. Maybe I want to start wholesaling in Texas, right? The second reason I find people pick territories is because they've been there before. Maybe they've traveled to Georgia, they've traveled to North Carolina, they've liked the area, that's piqued their interest. So they're like, let me dive a little bit deeper. So this two-step system I'm going to give you, you can apply to any areas that you're looking at like that and instantly know if it's a good territory to start it or not. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to go to Google and you want to type in the county that you're looking to start in, right? And the population. Okay, so you give an example. If you're looking at Tampa, that would be Hillsborough County, Florida, population, right? You're going to type that in. It's going to come back. And checkbox number one is that there's at least 250,000 people in that territory. Okay. What I have found is if you find a territory with less than 250,000 people, you're going to have a more rural type of an area. It could be harder to sell deals. You're not going to have a lot of problems getting sellers to say yes, but you will have a problem getting those deals sold because there's not going to be as many buyers there, right? So I look for that first checkbox. If it says 250,000 people, that's check mark number one, right? Step number two is going to Google again, and you're going to type in that same county and median home price. Now, if you don't know what the median home price is, I know you got some advanced listeners here, but I'm just going to share this just in case there's a newbie listening. If you picture a timeline in your mind, on the far left-hand side, you have the cheap houses that are like $50,000. And on the far right-hand side, you have the multi-million-dollar properties. The median home price is the price in the middle. It's the price that is the most popular that everybody wants, right? So as a wholesaler, we want to go after the properties that everybody wants. We don't want unique. We don't want strange. We don't want interesting. We want cookie cutter, just like everybody else in the properties that everybody wants, right? Yep. So the median home price, what we look for is a minimum of $200,000 there. Okay. So the way you do that, you're going to put a median home price your area, and you're going to click a Zillow link. You'll see a Zillow link pop up. It'll tell you what the median home price is in that area. So again, if that's 200,000, checkbox number two. I've found that if you combine those two, a minimum population size of 250,000 and a minimum median home price of 200,000, that is the combination for a fantastic market. You're going to have enough deals to sell. You're going to be able to find enough sellers, and you're going to make fat assignment fees, right? So that's really good.
You know what I really appreciate about this is that it's very similar to how I teach people to find a territory or a market when it comes to storage. Now the numbers are different, right? But it's essentially the same process, and this is something that with a Google search anybody can do. One quick follow up I have, Chris, is are you aware of any resources or tools online where people can like search a particular state and it gives them all of this data all in one shot? Or is this more of, hey, come up with a handful of counties and then go search to see if it checks those two boxes that you just outlined?
Sure. So what you can do, if you're looking for a list, you could do a search for top major metro areas in the United States 2024, right? And that'll provide you the list of the top major metro areas. And then you can just go down the list and see which ones apply to this 2-step formula that I've given you. And then that should get you off to a fast start.
Okay, awesome. One of the questions, man, that I wanted to ask you is, you and I know a lot of wholesalers, right? And there's some that succeed. There's some that don't even get off the couch and get started. And there's some that are just struggling. What would you say once somebody has identified their market? I'm somebody who I've learned so much from people that share their quote unquote failures or their lessons learned, right? So like for somebody who's in wholesaling or thinking of getting started with virtual wholesaling, they choose a market. Now that you've outlined exactly how to do that, it's helpful for them to know you've been someone who you've worked with a lot of successful wholesalers and virtual wholesalers across the country. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you see amongst the wholesalers that you've worked with and the ones that you've networked and mastermind with?
Yeah. So a lot of people think that it's getting enough leads and getting deals, but I feel the number one challenge that wholesalers have in today's market is finding cash buyers, right? Growing a cash buyers list. A lot of people think that you should lock up a deal and then just, go into new territory, lock up a deal and then, pray that it'll sell itself because you picked it up at a good price, right? But at the end of the day, like you really don't know what that looks like, especially when you're stepping into new territory first. So what I say is you should find your buyer first. So when you go into a new territory, right? So step one is pick this territory. Step two is go in and find your buyers first. You want to build a list of a minimum of 100 buyers before you even start marketing for sellers to make sure that you're going to be able to sell your deals. Okay. So the way that you do that, and the best way that you can do that, is join all the local Facebook groups in the area that you're going to go in. So let's say you're going to go into Atlanta, Georgia, right? What you want to do is you want to go ahead and join all the Facebook groups that are real estate investor related on Facebook for Atlanta, Georgia, the county, the state, right? And what you want to do is you want to go in there and find people that have listed properties for sale, and then click the comments. You're going to see a list of emails of people saying, I'm a buyer, I'm a buyer, I'm a buyer, right? DM these people, send them emails, however you want to reach out to them, but reach out to these people and find out if they're still actively buying, if they'd like to be added to your off-market list. Right? Very, very simple. If you spend an hour a day doing this, you'll have your first 100 buyers inside of 30 days. And that's only if you spend an hour a day. Do it for a year. One strategy, you'll have around 1,200 buyers added to your list.
That's incredible, man. And I love that the way that you kind of are sharing, whether it's picking a territory or whether it's building a buyer's list, these are bite-sized, simple things that anybody could do. All it requires is a little bit of time, energy, and effort, right? Now, I don't know, feel free to push back on this, Chris, but I know when I was wholesaling, I always focused on adding quality buyers to my list. But if I'm being honest, what I really realize is the 80-20 rule, right? Like there's a certain 20% of my buyers list. And if I'm being really, really honest, it's actually even less than 20%. But the point is a small percentage of your buyers list are going to be the ones that are your repeat buyers. Have you found that to be the same in your business and the coaching clients that you're working with?
Oh, absolutely. A small percentage of your list, probably I would say 10, maybe 20% is going to be your repeat buyers. Could be even a little bit less than that. But the rest of the list is your one-off buyers. These are okay too. And the reason I say that is because there's 3 types of contacts you want to have on your list, right? The first type of contact is a cash buyer. A lot of people think you just want cash buyers on your list and that's it, right? But you want cash buyers. The second contact that you want to have is wholesalers. Now, some of you listening might be like, oh, no, I don't want to put wholesalers on my list. They're going to daisy chain my deals and sell them and stuff like that. Here's the thing. You want to have relationships with wholesalers because wholesalers have buyers that you don't. Even if it's a brand new wholesaler, he can have a buyer that's out of the country, that's friends with his mom or something like that, that's just looking to buy at top dollar prices just because he wants a vacation home to go back and forth to, right? So if you build relationships with wholesalers the right way, they can be a fantastic source of deals. Just always have paperwork in place to make sure that it's a clean transaction and explain to them that the only people they're able to market the deal to is their list or one-to-one conversations. You don't want to see it blasted out over social media or Craigslist. If you do, they're off your list and it's done, right? So most won't risk a relationship like that. The third contact that you want to have is a realtor, right? A lot of people think wholesalers think realtors the devil and they hate wholesalers. Couldn't be further from the truth. Realtors can bring buyers that you could never get access to. So that's the type of buyers you're going to add from the Facebook groups. And you want to have those because even if you have a bunch of onesie twosies, right? If you have a lot of buyers over time, that can add up to a lot of deals.
That's right. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, you said people should be focused on building even once they get their top 100, right? Their first 100 buyers. You said an hour a day just focused on going to Facebook, joining the local Facebook groups, looking at the properties that are being listed for sale or whatever, and then go in the comments and then start DMing, sending emails to these people, regardless of how big your buyers list is. You should constantly be working on that buyers list because there's going to be times where people stop buying. They might be an active buyer, but because they get overloaded or a season of their life, whatever, they run out of capital. There's a variety of reasons people stop buying. So to me, that's like your marketing faucet. Like never turn that off, constantly be building buyers, right? Talk a little bit about the importance of that.
Yeah. So a lot of people think that the biggest expense in wholesaling is marketing, but it's actually the deal that you couldn't sell, right? And so it doesn't matter what stage of the game that you're at, you should always be building your buyers list every single day. One of the things I can tell you after doing this for 10 years and over 600 deals is that, there's been times in my business where I've gotten comfortable and I've been like, we have enough buyers. We don't need to continue to market for buyers. We got a ton of buyers. No need to continue marketing, right? And then we'd come across that one deal that we had a really hard time selling. And then another wholesaler had to sell for us and we gave away a large chunk of the fee. And then I'm like, dang it, we got to continue building our buyers list, right? So you should be marketing to your buyers as much, if not more, to build your buyers list than you do to sellers.
Well, and you see, so like at the beginning of the podcast, I kind of seeded that you think about virtual wholesaling a bit different than some others that I know. And that's one of the factors right there. Like you approach it, hey, let me first find the buyer, then and continue marketing for buyers, and then let me go find the property. And I find that most people think about it differently, right? And I'm not necessarily saying one is right or wrong, but I really like the way that you approach this is it's like I had a conversation with somebody not too long ago that was thinking of starting a business, and they were sharing with me how they were planning on designing the products and services. And after I let her talk for a while, I said, let me ask you a question. I won't mention her name because I know she listens to the show, but she'll kind of like be like smiling when she hears this because she'll know the conversation. I said, let me ask you a question. How do you know there's a market? How do you know you have customers for this specific, like have you? And what I was encouraging her to do, and she had a mindset shift in that conversation, Chris, was like, go find the client first, then figure out how you're going to provide the product and service. And it's kind of the same thing you're doing here is, hey, let me go find the buyer. Let me figure out what they want. Then let me go find them the property, right? And again, I wanted to highlight and underscore that because so many people are always focused on lead gen specifically for sellers and acquisitions. And don't get me wrong, that's a really important component of the business, but it's one component of the business.
One component. And here's the thing, what blows my mind, right, is that in wholesaling, you can have the best deal in the world, but if you can't sell it, it doesn't matter. So if your income and being able to make income in wholesaling is based upon having buyers, like that's the reason you want to find your buyer first, because you find what they want, you go market what they want, and then bring them the deal, and it makes it much easier. A lot of people lock up deals in new territories, even if they're more advanced, they'll step into a new market. They spend all this money, thousands of dollars, sometimes even tens of thousands of dollars on marketing for sellers. They get this influx of deals and then like drop, sell, right? And if you add up all the money they lost in drop deals, that could have totally been avoided if they would just built their buyers list first. Right. Yeah. So, it's just super important, especially when you're making income in wholesaling depends on having a buyer. It makes sense to find the buyer first.
Yeah, man. And look, I'm thinking back to my experience, right? Like when we were running the wholesaling operation here in South Florida, I would, if I'm being honest, 85 to 90% of our marketing budget was spent on motivated seller leads. Right. A very small percentage of that marketing budget was allocated towards buyers. And I remember we were usually pretty good at the disposition side. Right. But like every now and then we'd have a property that we didn't have a buyer for. And then that's when we went to our wholesaler partners and our realtors, and we'd have to give up a chunk of the deal. And so when you listen to Chris say like the most expensive thing is like a drop deal, like think about how much money other wholesalers and or realtors are making off of your deals. That's only because you didn't have that buyer and they did, right? So if you get one thing so far out of this podcast is make sure that you're focused on always building your buyers list, because it sucks, man. When you work so hard, you spend so much time on sales training and marketing and lead gen and conversions, you get a contract, you put it out there, you work it only to have that fall through, aside from the fact that like you didn't honor your word, right? Like when you went under contract, that seller, that homeowner is expecting that they want to get paid, right? Like they need to sell that house for a reason. And man, one of the worst things is just not being able to follow through and having to go back to the seller and say, hey, we're not able to move forward here. Right. So that's a whole nother conversation, but it resonates with me, kind of the approach that you're sharing here. So were you going to add something else, Chris?
Yeah, just one last thing on that. So one of the reasons why it's very important to find your buyer first, right? Especially if you're going to new territories, and even if you're just getting started, is because buyers can give you invaluable information about a new territory you're going into, right? So you're growing your buyers list, the people business, you're building a relationship with them. You're like, hey, just out of curiosity, what are the top zip codes that you're buying houses in? Like, where do you love to buy houses? Where do you want to avoid, right? Love to just understand a little bit more about the area so I can bring you the best deals, right? They will just open their mouth and run, right? They'll be like, okay, so the top 10 zip codes you want to target are here. I wouldn't touch this area with a 10-foot pole. Here's why. Because one of the biggest issues that I find that people have when going into a new market is locking up deals in areas they shouldn't, right? So maybe a zip code that, even though the county and the territory has the median home price, it has the population, right? There are certain zip codes in that territory you want to stay away from, and the best way to do that is networking with your buyers and realtors, right? So people will lock up deals in those areas, they'll have to drop them, and they're like, shoot. And after dropping 2 or 3 deals, they finally learn I should stay away from that area. But what if you could take that $2,500 you spent to get a deal, $5,000 you spent to get a deal, right? And you knew that ahead of time. Imagine for a minute, if you could take that money, reinvest it back into marketing to get more deals in the right areas, how much more deals could you do?
God, man, and even if it represents an extra deal a month, I mean, think about how much revenue we're talking about annually. Right. Yeah, just by implementing that one little thing. So I love it, dude. Well, man, let's transition into one part of the business, a department of the business that I find doesn't get enough energy and attention in our space, at least from what I see, right? Like people are always talking about marketing, acquisitions. Let's talk about dispositions, because to your point, we've spent some time talking about like building a buyer's list. Now let's talk about the actual dispositions process. What have you found are some of the areas where you guys have shined when it comes to dispositions and how you teach your clients that maybe others don't really focus on?
Yeah, so we have a copy and paste process for dispositions that we do for every single deal, every single time, does not change. And our process for selling deals didn't radically change. We didn't, grow to over 7 figures until we put this one process in place. And we learned from some of the best. We took a look at what some of the top companies were doing that are selling hundreds of deals a year. And we said, what are they doing that we're not? Right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, these guys do way more deals than we were. So we're like, okay, they obviously know something. So let's break that down. So I interviewed a ton of people, right? One of the biggest things I can tell listeners on the show here is being humble in this business, because there's always someone that knows more than you. Okay. Right. And you always have to be willing to learn from those people, because that's how you can grow. Right. So put all the ego aside, ask the questions, and it's amazing how much people are willing to help when you do that. So what I did is I got that down. And, a top question people have is, Chris, how do you sell your properties in other states? Like, how do you do that without physically being in that state? How do you do it virtually, right? So what we do, the first step is we get the property under contract, obviously, right with the seller. The next step is we have one of our property inspectors go by the house and take pictures of the property, right? They take a whole bunch of different angles. And the property inspector for us is simply a realtor. That's it. Right? They're a local realtor. There are boots on the ground in the area. They take the pictures of the property. We get those back. We make sure that it lines up with what the seller said as far as the condition goes. And at that point, we're off to the ground races, and we're off hitting the ground running. Right? So we schedule a group showing 7 days out. Right? So 7 business days out from when we get the pictures, group showing. And the reason we do that is we want to build a lot of hype around this property, right? We want to get a lot of attention, a lot of eyeballs on this property, have some time to do some marketing. And so that way we can build up enough interest and get enough people at the property, right? And so along that time, while we're marketing the property, and when I say that, I'm sending out an email, we're doing a text blast, we're doing one-off calls to buyers that have performed in the past. So our real VIP list, like you mentioned before. Yep. And so we're doing that. And then during these conversations, we're planting seeds of scarcity, right? Authentic scarcity. Basically telling these buyers, hey, listen, because one of the top questions buyers have is, how can I get inside your property? So we're saying, hey, listen, we're having a showing here in the next 6 days or on Tuesday, the 25th. But I got to tell you, we're getting a lot of interest on this property. So what I'd recommend doing is make a sight unseen offer if you really want this property, because it may not be here at the time of the showing, or it may go for full ask or over asking. So at that point, they're going to think about it for a second. If they really want that property, they may make an offer sight unseen, right? And so in today's market, the market we're in right now, we would accept a full price offer. And we need two things to tie up the property. We need a signed assignment plus a deposit on file. But in the previous environment we were in, like 2021, it was like, what's your top dollar? How much are you willing to pay over asking? And then we would lock up a deal 20, 30K over asking sometimes. But,
right. Oh man, the good old days, huh?
Oh, yeah. It was crazy.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, so that's how we do it. And what our goal is to sell the property either sight unseen or at that first showing. And at a minimum or at a maximum, if we don't sell it at that first showing, we schedule one more group showing and that's it. Right? We want to be really respectful of the sellers and the property, especially if it's occupied or tenant occupied. And showing respect there is like limiting it to 2 showings maximum and then kind of going from there. But that's the way that we do it. We don't want 100 people going in and out of the property and inconveniencing the seller. It just ticks people off when you do that.
Not to mention, Chris, and I've been there before, when you don't set it up the way that Chris is explaining and you're trying to do one-off showings, right? It drains so much of your teams, or even if you don't have a team and it's you, either way, it drains time, energy, and bandwidth. Like, think about the back and forth to just coordinate one showing. Imagine having to do that a handful of times a week or even more, right? Yeah. So like the simplicity of Chris's system is, hey, the goal is to do one big showing. Let's drive as much interest and eyeballs to this one showing. And then if need be, a second. The one question I wanted to ask you is, and this may open up a can of worms on this podcast, right? Because I know there's a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? There's controversy. There's a difference of opinions when it comes to how transparent we are with sellers, right? As wholesalers. What does the conversation look like? And how transparent are you with the fact that, hey, they're opening their doors. There's going to be a bunch of people that walk through it. Talk to me about how you frame that conversation, how you set it up, because that, to me, that's a big part of this puzzle, right?
Yeah, no, great question. I love this question, actually, right? So there's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do it. So what I found is if you set the wrong expectation with sellers, it will really hurt your group showing. They're going to be very surprised, especially if you have a lot of people there. And there's a way that you can head this off. So here's how you want to do it. So we tell the seller is like, great, okay, so now we have the paperwork in place. Our next step is to schedule our property inspections or our photos of taking pictures of the property. And then after we have that conversation, we say, okay, so what we want to do is we want to go ahead and set up a time for our field managers, contractors, investors, and partners to get inside the property, right? When would be a good time for you to be able to do that on either Tuesday or Thursday, right? So that's how we really position it, is our field managers, contractors, partners, and investors.
Okay, got it. So, and are you having a conversation with the people that are the potential buyers that are actually walking through there? Hey, don't have direct conversation with the seller. If you have any questions, how are you planting those seeds with the people that you're marketing to, essentially?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do, and this really helps us in the virtual markets we're in, is we make sure that we have a property inspector. So our local realtor, who's our boots on the ground in that market, we have a property inspector at every single showing. We do not allow buyers to go to a property with the seller by themselves ever. It doesn't matter if we don't have someone or we're rushing to find someone. We always make sure we have someone from our team there. It makes us look more professional, and then buyers are less likely to do something they shouldn't. So our property inspector is trained to play interference there to where if a buyer tries to have a conversation with the seller, they'll cut them off and, hey, do you have a question? Oh, you did? Okay, great. No problem. Go ahead and reach out to your partner here at Rise Real Estate Group, and he can go ahead or your contact at Rise Real Estate Group. He'll answer your question and make sure you're good to go. Or, they'll say something like, go ahead and ask me at the end of the show. Right. So we have then trained to do that. But outside of that, we always have a conversation with our buyers ahead of time, say, hey, just give you a heads up. I know this isn't your first rodeo. You bought properties before, right? But no direct communication with the seller or tenants of the property. You're simply there to inspect the property. We want to keep these things short, quick, in and out, right, in 30 minutes. So use your time there to look at the property, evaluate it, to come to a confident buying decision.
Yeah, awesome. And one of the things, Chris, that I'll kind of like add, I'll sprinkle on to like your process, something that we used to do is we would always, like our disposition manager would share a story of someone else trying to go behind our back. And we share with them like that's the end of the relationship. We always remove them from our list. They didn't end up getting the deal. So we'll like, hey, like I know you wouldn't, like if you were the potential buyer, hey, Chris, I know you wouldn't do this, but it's like part of our process to kind of share this. Like we actually had an experience not so long ago where we had XYZ happen. And so we're not accusing that they would do that, but we just share a story and we plant that seed with them, right? And it's just been always part of our process on the disposition side. So something I wanted to kind of sprinkle into your process as well.
No, that's great.
Dude, I don't think I asked you this, but as far as the property inspector, AKA the realtor, two quick questions. One, how do you recommend people find that person? And then two, what does their compensation look like to go take the pictures, to show up at the property tour, whatever you call it? Like how do you find them? And then what's the compensation look like?
Yes, it's super easy to find these guys. What you want to do is you want to go to those local real estate investor Facebook groups that you've already joined because you're finding your buyer first, right? And then from there, you want to create a post in that group that basically says, hey guys, I'm a new investor in the area, looking to network with a local realtor to be our boots on the ground for all of our properties. Who's the best agent that you know, right? Drop their info below. You're going to have a ton of people commenting, realtors saying, me. And you're going to have buyers saying, oh, use this person. They're amazing. The person you want to go with is the person that gets recommended 3 times. Once you see a person that gets recommended 3 times, that's the person you want to go with because chances are they've worked with realtors, they've worked with investors in the past. They're being recommended by other investors. So it's going to be a safe bet.
Yeah. Dude, so far, everything, guys, here's what's really cool about what Chris has shared so far. I haven't heard one thing that requires money, right? Like going to Google to find your territory, going to Facebook to build your buyers list, to connect with agents and property inspectors. Like it just requires a commitment and time, energy, and focus. That's the only thing separating you from getting a deal, right? And doing deals virtually. So I just wanted to just mention that because I think it's awesome that so far there hasn't been, we haven't had to exchange any money in order to build this business and do these things. So I think that's absolutely awesome. Dude, as we start to kind of wind down here, people would throw virtual tomatoes at me if I didn't ask you about marketing, right? Like I mentioned a little while ago how everybody always wants to know about marketing. What's the new shiny object? What works? What doesn't? So in today's market, in 2024, I understand that you're a ninja when it comes to cold calling, right? And that's, correct me if I'm wrong, but cold calling is one of your favorite marketing acquisition strategies, correct?
Love it. Yeah. Cold calling is hands down my favorite strategy.
So this can be its own separate podcast, right? And maybe it should be, but give us the quick and dirty about cold calling for people that are watching and or listening to this podcast that either don't do cold calling because there's a certain level of fear around it, or maybe they just don't like it. And or they are doing cold calling, but maybe it's just not a very effective marketing channel for them. Like, what do they need to know to up their cold calling game and to start actually generating more leads? What do we need to know about cold calling in general?
Yeah, sure. So with cold calling, what's really important, so I hear a lot of people who say, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and hire some VAs to make calls for me, and then we're going to, bring in a ton of leads and it's going to be amazing. But like clockwork, typically it crumbles, right? So what you have to do with cold calling, I find it's very important, is to make some calls first yourself, right? Make some calls first, and you want to get good at it, understand how the process works, maybe get a deal under contract, but then after you get your first deal under contract, immediately hand it off to someone else to make calls for you, because that's really a minimum wage activity, right? So you shouldn't be doing this long term, but it's something that you should do to get experience so you can show someone else how to do it for you, right? So that being said, what I find typically with cold calling, it usually takes around 25 to 35 leads to get a contract. All right. So that's one of the reasons why I love cold calling. And then one of the other things I like about cold calling is if you're just getting started, it keeps your overhead low, which is great. And then even if you're seasoned, you've been doing this for a long time, you can grow cold calling and you can get deals for a lot less than you can from other marketing channels, right? In the most competitive real estate market that we've had in the last 10 years, our cost per deal was like $67, right? Which is crazy, right? Excuse me, cost per lead was $67 cost per lead.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So $67 cost per lead. I wish it was per deal, but cost per lead.
I was going to say, man, that's amazing. How do you do that? Right. That's terrifying.
To put that in perspective, there were a lot of people around that time that were paying $300 to $400 per lead when they're buying leads from somewhere or through pay-per-click or anything like that in popular areas. So that difference there, and to be able to walk away with deals that are like $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 from cold calling is just amazing, right? So with cold calling, it really also comes down to two things. It really comes down to the list and where you get your phone numbers from for that list, right? So in today's market, so the types of sellers that you want to target in an area where like you have higher interest rates, not a lot of sellers are wanting to move right now, there's a very specific, you got to think about who would want to sell right now. Right? Who would want to sell where, they're not going to care about the interest rates or appreciation or anything like that, right? And the people that I find are the best people to target right now is senior owners, right? So we're in a baby boom generation where there's 10,000 boomers that are retiring every single day here over the next 10 years. And so there's a lot of people downsizing. So we target people who are downsizing. The second group of people that I find are really motivated to sell right now are the tired landlords, guys that are tired of keeping up with tenants and toilets. And they are at a point where they tried to time the market. They weren't successful at it. Now they just want to cash out and retire. So those are two groups of people that you can target right away and immediately have success. But it's starting out with a simple dialer. We use batch dialer, which is a great dialer for that. And we call those lists, and that's what you want to do.
I love it, brother. I love it. One last question here before we kind of wrap up in the next few minutes is, do you recommend, let me take a few steps back. At what point would you recommend somebody going out and hiring cold callers, maybe going to a call center type format? Like how long would you recommend somebody cold call before they start to like outsource that part of the business?
Yeah, so I'd recommend getting your first deal, right? Getting your first deal, and then from there, taking the money that you get and reinvesting that into hiring cold callers. Now, you don't want to hire like 5 all at once, right? So what I'd recommend doing is once you do your first deal, hire either 1 to 2 cold callers, right? And get consistent. Right. So there's some things that you need in place to make sure they're consistent. You need a repeatable script that you can read every single time and get the same result every single time. I'd be happy to give my script to your listeners, Alex, as a bonus. So we can include that in the show notes if you like. Yeah.
Thank you, man.
And so having that script and then making sure that they are just following the process. One of the biggest issues that I find when someone goes to hand off cold calling, maybe they're dialing themselves, they're getting deals, they go hand it off, and then it takes a nosedive, is because they are the person they hand it off to is not sticking to the process. Maybe they stick to the process for the first week. The next week, they completely come off the rails. They start improvising. They start putting their own spin on the script, and nothing tanks leads faster than that, right? So that's the reason why you do it yourself. When you hand it off, make sure there's a repeatable process in place where it's working like clockwork. You're getting leads consistently. And from there, once you start getting your first deal from that cold caller, add another one and then another one and so on.
Dude, beautiful, man. Brother, this has been just a wealth of knowledge. I want to encourage everybody listening and watching. If you guys are interested in wholesaling, if you're currently doing wholesaling and or virtual wholesaling, but clearly you see the value that Chris can provide and just simple tweaks that he's already shared in this podcast, if it could just help you add one more deal, right, that you do this year, what would that represent for you as far as like revenue and profit, right? I want to encourage you guys to connect with Chris. So Chris, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen, but talk to us a little bit about like what it would be, what it would look like working with you, right? Because I know that that's something that you do with certain clients that kind of like fit what you're looking for.
Sure. So if you guys would like to get the results that we're getting and our clients are getting and learn how to wholesale houses from home anywhere in the country, whether you have an existing wholesaling business that's local, you want to go virtual, you're just getting started, want to do your first deal, what I recommend doing is go ahead and go to virtualwholesalingmadesimple.com. Alex has it on the screen here, virtualwholesalingmadesimple.com, and apply to work with me. And what I'd encourage you to do is make sure you're very detailed in your responses in the form when you're filling it out, because I go through and read out all those forms. I don't accept everybody, but if I like what you have to say, I'll consider inviting you in as a client. I look forward to having a conversation and working with you.
Awesome, Chris. So guys, virtualwholesalingmadesimple.com. Apply, connect with Chris if this is something that you're interested in. And with that being said, Chris, dude, I appreciate all the knowledge you shared, man. Love how everything you shared is free. Again, I wanna just continue to like beat that drum home, because anybody can do this, guys. You just need a commitment. You got to make a decision first. You got to decide, commit, and then just do the work, right? And even if you just rewatch or listen to this podcast, he's basically giving you the blueprint, right? So, dude, thank you for delivering value. And guys, make sure that you're subscribed to the Flip Empire show so that every single Monday morning you're notified when new episodes get released. And I just look forward to continuing to have awesome experts like Chris on the podcast, delivering value myself. And I really look forward to connecting on the next one. Have an incredible day, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Alex.
One last thing before you go. If you have been listening to the show for a while and or you have been getting value from the show, I would be 100% honored if you would share this show with a friend, or maybe share it with somebody that you think could benefit from this. It's my mission, it's my cause, it's my purpose through Flip Empire to impact and touch people's lives, to help people and in their businesses. So it would be an honor if you would be willing to share this episode. And one last thing, make sure that you're subscribed so that you get notified every Monday and Thursday when shows get released. I look forward to connecting with you on the next one. Until then, have a great day.